Shalom. We're going to jump into the book of Galatians, and we're going to start with verse 1. Paul, an apostle, not from man, nor by a man, but by Yahusha Messiah and Elohim the Father, who raised him from the dead. I want to read that one more time. Shaul, or Paul, an apostle, not from man, nor by a man, but by Yahusha Messiah and Elohim the Father, who raised him from the dead. We're going to jump in the book of Galatians and look and try to understand what is Paul talking about in this book and why. And hopefully that's our goal, to look at this book, is to have some understanding when we're finished. Now, this book is obviously highly controversial. It is highly misunderstood, but I believe it's also extremely relevant for our day, because I believe it ties into some end-time thinking, and we want to make sure we get this proper instruction, because if we don't, we may be already deceived or will be deceived if we don't understand some things. So with that being said, let's jump on in and kind of break down this verse a little bit. Today we're going to look a little bit at Shaul, but we're going to also look at what does it mean to be an apostle. And we'll also look at, in a future little talk, what does it mean to be specifically apostle Messiah, Yahusha, and this man versus Elohim split that we see throughout the book of Galatians. We see it in the very first verse here. So, without further ado, who is Paul? And it's important to understand who writes whatever letter we're looking at. That way we can get a better understanding of the background of the person. It gives us insight into what the letter actually means. And Shaul, or Paul, is the author of 13 to 14 of the 27 different letters that we see in the Renewed Covenant writings. So that's almost 50%. So it's really important to understand who this individual is. And we're going to just jump right into scriptures and get a few little tidbits on a little bit of background on Paul. And we will get more details later on about his actual revelation of Yahusha Messiah, how he came to know Yahusha and things like that. But for today, I want to give a little background information before he actually came to know Yahusha, and it gives us some insight into who he is. This is in Philippians chapter 3, verses 5 and 6, Paul talking about himself. Circumcised the 8th day, of the stock of Israel, of the tribe of Benjamin, and Hebrew of Hebrews, as touching the law or the Torah, a Pharisee, concerning zeal, persecuting the assembly. The King James Version says the church. Touching the righteousness of the law, the Torah, blameless. So this is some key information. We are understanding that Paul is an Israelite, that he's from the tribe of Benjamin, which would be connected with Yehuda, or the southern house of Israel. And he was raised as a Pharisee. Matter of fact, his father was also a Pharisee, which we learn later on from the book of Acts as well. Let's read something else. Paul also gave a little bit of witness in the book of Acts in chapter 22. We'll be spending a lot of time in the book of Acts, because it gives a great insight into the timing of the book of Galatians. I'm just mentioning this little tidbit right now. Acts 15, the council, is directly linked to the book of Galatians, which is kind of a response from the Acts 15 council. So we'll talk about a little bit of chronology and things like that later on. But if you're studying, going through the book of Acts, and you get to that council, then read the book of Galatians right after. It makes you'll see the connection there. But anyways, in Acts 22, verses 3 through 5, it is written. This is Paul giving a testimony of himself. I'm indeed a Yehudite, having been born in Tarsus of Cilicia, brought up in this city, this is Jerusalem, at the feet of Gamaliel, having been instructed according to the exactness of the Torah of our fathers, being zealous for Elohim, as you all are today, who persecuted the way, he's referring to the early believers, to the death, binding and delivering up into prisons both men and women. And also the high priest bears me witness, and also the eldership, from whom I also received letters to the brothers, and went to Damascus to bring in chains even those who were there to Jerusalem to be punished. He's talking about when he was sent to Damascus to bind up people. So Paul was extremely, obviously, zealous for this way, and this is obviously before his encounter on the road to Damascus. We'll get into that more later on. But what I really wanted to point out is that in these two different quotes, Gamaliel is a well-known Pharisee, and in Acts 5 it makes mention that he's a doctor or a teacher of the law. And it's important to understand this when understanding Paul, because Paul's upbringing is that he understood the Torah very, very well. So when we read the book of Galatians that has an incredible amount of quotes from the Torah, if we don't understand the Torah, we're not going to understand Paul's writings. And Peter warns us of this in his epistle as well. In 2 Peter chapter 3, he gives us some insights about Paul's writings in verses 15 through 17 here. And reckon the patience of our master as deliverance, as also our beloved brother Shaul, which is Paul, wrote to you according to the wisdom given to him. He's talking about the patience, the endurance at the end of the age. As also in all his letters, speaking in them concerning the matters in which some are hard to understand, which those who are untaught and unstable twist to their own destruction, as they do also the other scriptures. You then, beloved ones, being forewarned, watch, lest you also fall from your own steadfastness, being led away with the delusions of the lawless. So we're warned in the book of 2 Peter that a lot of people get confused that aren't taught. It means taught in the scriptures, taught in the Torah, and they're unstable, and they twist the scriptures to their own destruction. And it's interesting, he talks about being led away with the delusions of the lawless. And it's so interesting that the book of Galatians is used as this license to sin, this license that they can be lawless, and it's absolutely incredibly false. And we're going to be getting into this a lot more. And when we come back, we're going to find out what it means to be an apostle, a sent one, according to the scriptures. Shalom.